Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Biz Jet TV. I've got a special guest with me today. I've got Ryan Tseko, who's a professional pilot but also an entrepreneur, and he's going to tell us his story of how he came to be who he is today, and it's a fascinating story, so tune in and listen to this one. Ryan, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you.
So Ryan, you started off as a pilot. You grew up in lovely Utah in the middle of the mountains and that. Tell us about how your love for aviation started. Where did that spark happen?
So the crazy thing is when I was a young man, I actually didn't know I was going to be a pilot. I was just typical, right? Like I actually dropped out of high school. I ended up going back and I had these odd jobs working at Subway and Jiffy Lube. And I really didn't know until I was 17 years old that my uncle actually had a passion for aviation. And so he bought a Cessna 175, which is a tricycle, but it's just a slant back. And when he bought this airplane, I remember because I was into motorcycles and I was into fast cars and I just like fast things. And he brought home the propeller, the prop, because he had taken it off of the airplane. And I was like, oh my God, I was like, what is that? And I was intrigued by this whole flying and aviation. And he's like, hey, look, you want to come help me, put my new Garmin in the glare shield. And so I started going to the airport every day, and I was 16, 17 years old. And so I caught this bug and I helped him put back this Cessna 175, and then we started going flying. And so it was a really cool gradient for me. And I looked at him one day and I said, man, do you think I could actually get paid to do this? Yeah. And when he said yes, I just lit up, and I was so curious of like, how do I go to pilot training and how do I do this quick? Because man, look, none of us want to do these, Subway and then Jiffy Lube and then the factory and then construction. And my uncle worked really hard. Yeah. And I knew that I didn't want to work with my hands. I knew that I wanted to work with my brain. And so I literally found the fast track. I went to Regional Airline Academy. It's similar to like ATP. Yep. And within 2 years, I had my private all the way to CFII. Yep. And I started building time, training people. But, that whole piece was like really, really fast, and it was really, really intense. And, looking back, I believe I did it the correct way because all I did is eat, sleep, and shit aviation. And by the age of 21 years old, I was actually hired on at a United Express carrier flying the CRJ 700, which for me at 21, that was like walking a kid into a candy store. Like I actually literally had to pinch myself. I was like, you guys are going to let me at 21 years old fly a $40 million jet. And at the time, they were brand new. We were literally taking the plastic off the seats, flying the Bombardier CRJ 700, which that airplane goes to 41,000 feet. I mean, it flies. I mean, it's fast. It's got first class. It's got, it's set up just like as a dream. Yeah. So how did you get the money to go to flight school? So I talked my mom into signing on a loan.
Okay.
And that story, I'll keep it really short, but I literally had a beg and my mom, actually my stepdad at the time, he was a real big believer in me. And, we had to talk my mom into, signing for $140,000 because look, it's a big loan. I mean, I don't care how old you are or how much your parents trust you. Literally my training was worth more than her condo at the time. Yeah. And so I went in the side channel, which was my stepdad, who was, he's like my best friend. Right. And he was very active, and he loves flying. He loved aviation. And so I talked my mom into signing $140,000. But the crazy thing was when I got that loan, it wasn't just like, okay, if I don't go and I fail, it's $140,000, because $140,000, whether it's back then in, early 2000s or now, $140,000 is a lot of money. And so I just knew I couldn't fail not only myself, but I couldn't fail my mother, because that would have literally bankrupted her. Yeah.
So you got into the airline fairly young. That's really good. In America, I got qualified as a jet captain at 22, flying citations. And then I flew for 5 years, private jets, before I got into the first airline. I was like 27. When I got in the first airline, through the Dornier 328 turboprop, then the jet, and then went on to fly the 737.
Which is still, that's very young.
Yeah, it's still very young. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'm actually shocked. I'm actually shocked at 21. I mean, I wouldn't have told them this when I got hired on, but I was actually shocked that they hired me. I had 750 hours because I missed. I didn't. Now you have to have 1,500 hours. Yeah. I missed all of that. When I got hired on, you could have 1,000 hours or less. You have to have specialized training. You had to go through all their specialized training, and then you had to have 2,500 hours to upgrade to captain. But literally, you could be 21 years old with your ATP, get hired on the airlines, 23 years old to upgrade as captain with 2,500 hours, which I hit, by the way. I was one of the youngest captains in the program. And so, look, I've hit a lot of these cool tracks, but starting young definitely pays off.
Yeah, definitely. And I always tell people, if you're going to learn to fly an airplane, younger you start, better off you're going to be. Guys that learn later on, especially if they want to go and fly jets and that, they tend to not be as quick. I guess your brain needs early on to start to tune into the speed of a jet, which is why fighter pilots are usually 20 years old.
Yeah, and look, it's also, Fabrizio, this. It's also the lifestyle too, right? The more you do it, like when I hop in the airplane or when I hop on a motorcycle, when I hop in a car, whatever it is, the more I do it, the more proficient I am.
Yeah.
And I always tell these young guys, like they're like, how do I get really good? Well, you got to do it a lot of times. I hit when I hit that mark of 10,000 hours, it was really a breakthrough for me because there's that book. What's that book? It's it talks about the 10,000 hours when you actually really start to become proficient. The same thing in real estate. I didn't realize this, but until you hit 10,000 units, you really don't have the economies of scale and the efficiency in a market. So all of these different things are translatable, but the faster you can get to 10,000 hours in flying, the more proficient, the better you're going to be. It's interesting. So when I went through and I won't digress, Fabrizio, but when I went through my pilot training and when I got hired on at 21, I upgraded to captain at 23 years old, and I was one of the youngest captains. And the mindset that I took on was this curiosity mindset. I didn't go in there. Yeah, sometimes I went in there, walking all bold, to the airport and acting like I knew it all. But I really knew that I didn't. And I respected all the different key elements in flying and in aviation because there's a lot of them, right? And it's actually not the airplane and the machinery. It's actually Mother Nature. And so those are the times where you find yourself getting into the most trouble, where you really have to respect Mother Nature because you can't fly straight on into a storm at 21 years old. That famous quote is, you've got old pilots and you got bold pilots, but there's no such thing as an old bold pilot, because you have to learn your limitations. And as a young man, I found that curiosity, asking a lot of questions, flying with the best pilots enabled me to really enforce and use the CRM, crew resource management, in a very efficient and proficient way.
Yeah. So you had this career as an airline pilot, and then at a certain point, still very young, you decide to pack it all in and go and work for Grant Cardone in real estate. What made you make that decision?
So, and this is very unique with my story. I actually knew that this is where I was going to be when I was 17, 18, 19 years old. I just looked at my life and I realized I didn't have any money. I asked my uncle when I was 17 years old, I was like, man, I want to buy my first house. And he looked at me, he's like, son, you have no money. Like literally, you have no money. And so he's like, you have to go work. You have to build your capital, and then you can go and start investing. And so at the age of 24, 25 years old, 2008, 2009 happened, the Great Recession. And I actually went back because I was based in Chicago and St. Louis and in the Midwest, and I was flying all around the U.S., Canada, Mexico. But what happened in 2008, 2009, I started going back to Arizona, Scottsdale, and things were selling at 50, 60, 70% discount. And so I actually bought my first place, my first home, and I started renting out rooms because Fabrizio, pilots, they always need a place to live, right? And so for me, I've always been this entrepreneur. People just didn't see it back then because nobody knew who I was. But I went and bought my first home. It was 4 bedrooms, and I leased out all 3 bedrooms. And so my mortgage payment was
like an Airbnb kind of thing.
Exactly. But I kept the master bedroom. So when I went back there, I had a place to stay for free. So I literally, my mortgage was $800. I was getting $1,200 in income, and I had a place to stay for free. And I was like, this is the house hacking trick, right? But I realized, I was like, man, this is something that I've always wanted to do. But I realized I didn't want to live with the people.
Yeah.
And so I bought a 4-plex. The 4-plex was my next investment. And I rented all 4. I bought it for $125, and I rented the units out for $500. I was cash flowing each month. And I built up to 21 units, and I found myself, I was a manager. I was going to work at the airline, trading my time for money, and I'd come home, and I had 21 units where people were calling me like, hey, Ryan, can you come pick up the rent? Hey, Ryan, my toilet broke. Hey, Ryan, this, da-da-da. And I found myself going from making, whether it's $100 an hour flying for the airlines, to working at a job that typically pays a property manager, I don't know, 10, 20, $30 an hour. And so I was like, there's got to be something better. And so I did that for 4 years, and I hit the age of 30,
Yeah.
And I realized that I wanted to do something bigger. I wanted to do bigger deals.
Okay.
And I found a lot of these roadblocks, right? Like, number one, getting the deal. I mean, a lot of these guys, if they don't know you and they don't trust you, they're not going to award you a 150 unit apartment complex, right? The second thing was I realized that the bank, I didn't have any experience, and I didn't have a property manager that could back me up, because I didn't have, I had built this great real estate, or this great flying, I call it my flying portfolio. Like, everybody believed in me. I was a trainer. I was a check airman. I was all these things. But when I went and transitioned to the real estate world, nobody knew who I was.
Yeah.
I had these cool stories, right? I mean, and that counts for something, but the bank does want to see experience. And then the third thing is, I didn't know, like, once you have 50 grand or 100 grand or 200 grand, you run out of money. And so I didn't know how to raise money from outside investors. And then, so that I didn't have a network, but I didn't have the confidence. And so at the age of 30 years old, I started watching YouTube, what people are going to see us on today.
Yeah.
And I found the Grand Master Flex, Grant Cardone. I mean, everybody knows him now, but when I've been with him for 9 years every day. 9 years ago, we didn't know these mentors. We didn't know Grant Cardone. We didn't know all these people like we do today, because social media wasn't as big back then.
Yeah.
And so I literally picked up the phone. I called his office and I said, I want to come work for you. Now, the craziest thing in the world, and this is what's cool about life, right, is you prepare for these moments in time. He was literally working through buying a G200, like going through due diligence. And so I called him. I said, look, I could fly for you, but I also want to work with you in the real estate department. He's like, well, what do you mean? He's like, can you even fly this airplane? I was like, yeah, I've got 10,000 hours and I've got 21 units. And he's like, look, come work for me as a sales guy. And literally, I got hired on. 2 weeks later, I started working for Grant Cardone. And then 9 years later.
You left the airline job. You quit the airlines and went straight to Miami.
Yeah. And people thought I was batshit crazy, Fabrizio. People literally thought I was crazy. Like, you're giving up the 401k, the 18 days off, the captain's seat. I was literally getting slotted to go fly for Mainline United. I knew I literally went up to Denver and spoke with the chief pilot. He loved me. He actually met me on a flight. Crazy story. Met me on a flight where there was a huge storm in Denver. But look, I had all these connections in aviation, but I gave them all up because I knew how big this was going to be with Grant Cardone. Yeah.
So you landed there. So Grant hadn't quite bought his first jet yet. It was all happening when you got there.
Yeah. So he literally was buying his first. It was a 2008 G200 super mid cabin, which at the time was a banger. I mean, it was a great deal, right?
I remember the first time I spoke to Grant was the day after he bought the jet, the first jet. That's the first time I spoke to him. When we did an interview and we talked. So I remember back then. Yeah.
And he went through this kind of blind, like he was, but the one thing that Grant does know is he knows where to, like in real estate too, he knows how to buy a good deal. He bought the G200, had low time, 300 hours. It was like one owner. The guy was up from the Northeast, always kept it hangared. And I used to say we have one of the nicest G200s on the market, because a lot of them were being used for like net jets and all these places. They were being used and boom, 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 one flight after the other. When we got ours, it was really nice. It was well maintained. The carpet, the interior, everything was great. The engines were on the programs. The airframe was on the programs. And so when I took it over, it was a mess, but I was able to, in really quick fashion, I was able to get everything plugged into Abjet, which is now Jet Aviation at the time. We used them for our management. And I was able to get everything in line, all the manuals, and really get the aircraft in tip-top shape so Grant could start using it to travel all around the world. And then, once we had the G200, that's really what got me and Grant, hanging out every single day. And that's where the opportunities came in with the real estate and the flying. And I was doing both for a number of years, but we just got to the point where the real estate just got so big where we had to hire the 2 pilots for the airplane and the two pilots for the helicopter.
Yeah. So, because I remember him telling me, he said, one of my pilots has a business with me. I thought, that's interesting. As I always call it, especially with private jets, you need a pilot with a brain, not just someone that can fly. Because, managing a private jet is, and the fact that, I think a lot of pilots that are watching this or listening to this, they may say, that's interesting. I can, still be a pilot, still do the flying, but also maybe get into business with the boss, which is something that you've managed to do. So how was that transition? How did you find the transition?
Well, look, I mean, it's a good question too. So they're all interrelatable, right? And also interchangeable. If you're going to run a business, when you fly for the airlines, literally you go and you plop your ass into the left seat or the right seat, and you go fly the jet. You've got the maintenance guys who come and they handle everything. You got the dispatchers who handle everything. You've got, the flight attendants who handle everything. In general aviation, you don't have that. Grant didn't want a flight attendant. We didn't have a director of maintenance. We used Avjet, which was based in Burbank at the time. Now they got absorbed by Jet Aviation. But it was literally myself and the other pilot who ran everything.
Yeah.
And when you are, I'm going back to this word curious, and you want to be the damn best, you start asking a lot of questions. And so, when I was at the airline, I had a lot of great mentors. When I transitioned to general aviation, I had a lot of great mentors who had already been through it. And so I literally would call like 2 or 3 of my top guys and ask them all these questions. Hey, how do the programs work? Hey, how does all this flight planning work? Hey, how does the catering work? How does the hangar space work? And so I went through everything. And I started looking at all of the numbers. I remember it's a cool story. Grant asked me one time, he's like, hey, we're going into maintenance. What's the cost of this? And I kind of stuttered and fumbled a little bit, like on the cost of the tire, not being, it was like the tire was like, at that time, it was like 21 grand or whatever. Now it's probably 3 times that with inflation and everything else that's going on.
Yeah.
But he's like, Ryan, if I ask you what the cost is and you don't know, and you're just saying, oh, it's only, 21 grand. He's like, you will no longer work here and work for me. And that was a wake up moment for me. Yeah. And so I started knowing everything. Hey, how much the tire cost, what the timing was, how to refurbish them. And so that way, when he would ask me these questions, I can go back with him in a very, hey, the tire's $21,000. It's going to have a turn time of 6 days. The place that's going to do it is right down the street here in Boca Raton. And so I started banging all this stuff out and really managing the budget and being prepared for the next year's budget, which Fabrizio goes back into real estate and Cardone Capital. Now I have 12,000 units that I oversee, and then office buildings. It's the exact same thing. You budget for the year, you track, you trust, you got to verify. And so all of that stuff managing this business is the exact same. This is just bigger, but I like to say it's in gradients. And so for all the military guys and all the pilots, I highly recommend that you get really serious, because all your skills are translatable and transferable into real life, into business, where, now we crowdfund. We're one of the largest crowdfunders in the world. We've raised $1.1 billion from retail investors, meaning we cut out all the middle people, and we just go out and buy real estate, and we manage the hell out of it with that same vigor and energy like I've done in the past and Grant has done, to make sure that bottom line hits.
So how has your life changed now that you've become vice president of Cardone Capital? How has your life changed from being an airline captain to being vice president of this mega big company with lots and lots of properties under management?
Well, my life has gotten better. And what I mean by that is, I think we all want to flourish and prosper. We all want to grow.
Yeah.
And I put myself in a position where I'm surrounded by a bunch of really, really smart people. Mm-hmm. And when I flew for the airline, I was still surrounded by a bunch of really, really smart people, but now they're a lot smarter. And what I mean by that, and I'm not taking anything away. Please don't I'm not taking anything away. But in the airlines, what I found is that a lot of people were smart. Like I had maintenance guys that were brilliant. I'd only talk to them. Yeah. I had crews that were really, really sharp, and I'd only want to fly with them. Yeah. Here in this world, I get to pick and choose who I surround myself with, because this is really important, right? Like, I get to make decisions for Cardone Capital. I get to, think about this. I'm around the biggest, the best social media and entrepreneur in the world. And so Grant Cardone is really, really smart, and he is really, really edgy. And I get to say that I get to be surrounded by him every single day. And that's what I wanted. So my life has changed in the fact that my goal used to be, I want to be surrounded by the movers and shakers, the top of the world, the entrepreneurs, the people who are helping people, right? So I get to help a lot of people. So when I was flying for the airlines, I was helping a lot of people, 70 people at a time, right? 100 people at a time, because I was take-on, off, and landing. Now it's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. And I get to not only share my story, but I also get to run and help Grant run this platform that, in my opinion, is changing the way people look at investing, changing the way people invest, changing the way people look at 401ks. This is huge. I mean, we are moving into a land of, I like to call ourselves pathfinders. We are changing the way people look at alternative investments. And so I'm blessed, I'm happy, and my life has changed in a phenomenal way.
Yeah. So what type of projects are you involved in now? Because you're involved also in Cardone Ventures as well. Because now
So
Grant's investing in startups and projects and things besides. So he's diversifying from real estate, getting into other things as well. So tell us a
yeah,
bit about
so yeah, Fabrizio. So I'm a part of the Cardone Capital side, the real estate piece. Our partner Brandon Dawson, he runs Cardone Ventures.
Okay.
Jared and Sherry, they run Cardone Training. For me and Grant, we run Cardone Capital. So really, what I'm a part of is, my day looks like this. I'm either looking for deals, 300 units, 500 units, a portfolio of multifamily apartments. We do buy some office, and we do look at some other investments, but our main right down the fairway is multifamily. And we go out and we run a really tight process, meaning, we go out and we buy these great institutional assets, and then we allow outside investors to come in and partner with us, and we hold them for 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And we built this phenomenal portfolio. And then to your point, we do have these other companies that add value to what we're doing. And this is the same model like KKR and some of these big institutions they run, but yeah, I oversee, and I'm very specialized in multifamily apartments, how to find them, how to buy them, how to put great debt on them, how to hold them, how to take all those benefits and shove them back to the investors, and then just rinse and repeat.
Yeah. So how is this market going now? Because with inflation going up, bank rates going up, and that, I mean, how do you see the real estate investment market going over the next year or two?
So over the past year, we haven't bought a lot of deals because interest rates have gone up.
Yeah.
Actually quite substantially.
Yeah.
Going back to your inflation though, when interest rates go up, you have a slowdown in sales because the cost to buy the real estate, it gets cheaper because people want the yield. And so, we've seen this split where there's not as many sellers and there's not as many buyers because they can't agree on a price. That's the very simplistic terms of it, right?
Yeah.
Inflation is actually helpful for us because when inflation happens, the cost to build actually goes up. So all of our assets that we've purchased, in relative terms, it's been great because the cost to build, the developers have to actually, spend more money and they have to get more of a rent. And so what we're seeing is there's a couple of things. We're seeing the buildings slow down, and there'll be some developments and there'll be some builds, but I think it's going to be harder to build. And so all the real estate that's already in existence, I think we're going to have a housing shortage by the 2035 because they're just not going to be able to keep up with the amount of migration, with the amount of homes that are needed for this population. And so, look, I think in real estate and multifamily specific, especially what we invest in, we have now renters by choice. Yeah. And so inflation will help the existing assets. Inflation is going to not help the builder, but the buildings that we currently own, like for example, we have a complex here in South Florida where people make $250,000 and they want to rent a beautiful apartment in downtown Fort Lauderdale because the rent's still $3,000, $3,500. In the grand scheme of the world, those rents are still relatively low. So look, I think we're in for a specific market. I think you have to be, more picky and you have to choose exactly what assets you want to purchase. But I do think that there is a lot of opportunity in the next 12 and 24 months. If you have cash, to go and buy assets, I think there's a huge opportunity for groups like ours to go and buy great quality assets and hold them for the next 10 years.
Yeah, I noticed that when you and Grant go around the world with the G650, you've looked at real estate in other countries. Is there any plan there to invest in other countries as well? Or you just want to stick to the US market?
We're going to stick to what we know. There's a lot of markets that we can invest in. We're still really, really, really highly focused on the US because we think there's a lot of great opportunities here, and we know these markets inside and out. I mean, literally, our biggest portfolio is here in the state of Florida. With the migration, we've seen a lot of great success, and we think that doesn't slow down. Yeah. Especially when you get into politics too. And I know you don't want to talk about UFOs and politics and all that stuff, but when you start
but the next question is interesting because what's your whole take on how the economy is playing out in today's very divisive and contentious world?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the marketplace, we're always going to run off these headlines of the scare tactics. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I mean, at some point in time, everybody has to wake up and say, okay, is there only bad news? I mean, can there only really be bad news in life?
Yeah.
In my front view, there can. And so, you have to take these headlines for what they're worth. and the controlling factors of what they are. For whether it's, the election, we have a huge election coming up, Fabrizio, in the next year. And I think there's going to be a lot of mud being slung. And I think there's going to be a lot of these candidates that are going to be, propped up. But look, I mean, whether you're a politician or you're a businessman or you're a state and local municipality, you have to look at real estate as an investment because people have to live somewhere. So I don't know these marketplaces from, stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. I know it from a real estate standpoint. That's what I'm really good at. And I just go back to this underlying thesis. You have to have a place to live.
Yeah, you need food to eat and a place to live. So investing in agricultural land or property, you can't go wrong because people are always going to need a place to live and food on the table.
And I think the more complicated and the more complex that we make it, actually people stop investing. When people look at real estate, I think it's been not only sold as the American dream, but I think it's been sold as a great real estate investment because people can understand it. You literally, you buy this, you can touch it, see it, feel it. Whether you live there or you rent it out, people pay you rent each month. You send out the distribution each month because you got rent that month. And then you just hold it and you own real estate for a long period of time and you get all the benefits associated with it. I mean, I think it's a pretty easy investment strategy and thesis that people could actually understand. And that's why I think we've seen so much success at Cardone Capital is because people are like, damn, this is newer. I get direct access to the deals, cut out all the middlemen. And, I've got lead guys like Grant Cardone and Ryan Tseko who negotiate the hell out of everything. And, we make ourselves available.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important. Now, we'll touch on the UFO subject. As it's in the press right now, there was a big conference in Washington just the other week where all these generals and whatever stood up and said, yes, we have alien technology. We've had it for a while. There's been that video released from the US Navy of that tic-tac thing flying. They're not quite sure what it is. It's unidentified. Whether it's built by the Koreans or the Chinese or some guy in his back garden, in his garage, has come up with some new propulsion system and just was doing a test flight that day, or it comes from some alien planet. Who knows? Now, you being an aviator yourself, spent a lot of hours in the sky like myself. I've seen a couple of unidentified flying objects. I've never met with an alien, never had an alien land in my back garden. I've spoken to people that claim to have seen an alien or met with them or even gone on their spaceship. Now, whether this is true or not, I don't know, because I haven't experienced it myself. Some of these people.
But you want to, though, right? Fabrizio, you want to, though, right?
I'd like to. I mean, why not? I mean, it'd be pretty cool to meet someone from another planet and get on a spaceship and go there. But, what's your take on all this? Is this another story they're trying to feed us? Or is this something that's actually real? I mean, what's your take?
No, look, I don't think this is just a story. I think that this is real. And so whether UFOs are from, existing current planet or other planets or other energy forms, look, you have to believe in other energy sources and in other energy forms. If you don't, I think that you're living underneath a rock. I do see the headlines. I do see these committees. I'm actually quite a student of these studies. I think it's very fascinating. I think it's very interesting. I think if you look back in history, there's a lot of signs that maybe we've missed or we haven't talked about. And look, this isn't a scary conversation. I mean, look, if there's other planets and other life forms, I think we should embrace that. I think we should explore it. And I don't think we should hide it. I don't think we should hide it. I've spent 10,000 hours in the air. There are certain things that you see from weather balloons to the Northern Lights to jets to afterburners to military operations. I mean, there's a lot of these factors that go into, what did you really see?
Yeah.
But UFOs, and what are they calling them now? So it's UFOs,
unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP.
Yeah, UAP. Yeah, that's the new one. So look, I mean, it's a real thing. Have I seen UFOs? Probably. Do I want to sit here and talk about UFOs? Are you going to look at me a little different? I don't care. I mean, I think that we're moving into an age where there's going to be more UFOs, more UAPs, because there's going to be more testing, and going into whether it's a UFO and or a human drone. I think we move into a world that looks similar to, you remember the Jetsons?
Yep.
How do we not move into that state? How do we not move into that world of flying objects? How do we not move into exploration of, I mean, look, Elon Musk is one of the great leaders that we currently sit and look at today, because he's willing to take risks and go and explore these other planets. He's going to, he's willing to explore. So I think we're gonna explore, and I think we're gonna see a lot of what we're currently calling UFOs, or what do they call them? UAPs. Yeah. I think this is going to be the story that continues to unfold, and I hope other people see them, and I hope I see more of them.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, talking about history, you just look at the ancient Egyptians and the pyramids. And I mean, I just interviewed a lady on my podcast, Quantum Action podcast, the other week. She's an Egyptologist, spent 8 years in the pyramids, actually physically in the pyramids, translating stuff and whatever. And she claims to have been abducted by aliens when she was 9. She's written a series of books. She sent me a couple of her books. I just finished reading one just the other day. Fascinating story, written really well. Reads as a sci-fi novel. Now, is it fiction or non-fiction? I don't know. Fascinating story, but you just have to look up at the stars at night, and you can't not think that there isn't life on other planets. And then as soon as you have that thought, well, there's probably more advanced civilizations and less advanced. Now, if we focus on the more advanced, maybe they have been coming and going here. Maybe they did help the Egyptians build the pyramids, or maybe they did build them. Who knows? I mean, this lady I interviewed the other day, Elena Danan, she claims that the pyramids were built by the Egyptians with some help from people from another planet. So interesting. I mean, we are more in the air these days. Now we've got the electrical vertical takeoff and landing projects going on around. There's about 500 of them at the moment. None of them have been certified to flying passengers at the moment, but it's coming. Another 2 or 3 years.
Hey, Fabrizio, let me ask you a question. So in her book, is she saying it's fact, or is she saying, so she's actually claiming that she was abducted by aliens in a UFO in that book?
Yeah. Well, basically what happens is they beamed into her room, took her up to this ship, did some experiments on her, and then these were the bad guys. And then she was saved by another alien race. This is what she claims. Then she forgot everything because they did something to her brain. And then she kept having these dreams and whatever. And so just in 2018, a friend of hers said, you need to go and see this hypnotherapist, psychologist person, because he'll do this hypnotic regression. Because there's something going on there. So she went through these sessions, and during those sessions, she remembered what had happened to her. And then a whole new world opened up to her. And then she started writing these books and telling the stories of her so-called adventures with these aliens. Now, whether it's true or not, I don't know. She seems to be quite credible to me. But, you get a lot of wackos in the UFO field. But, I've read a lot of these books, and I've been to conferences and spoken to people and that. And I must say, something is going on. I can't pinpoint exactly what, but there's too many credible people out there from, former US generals and things like that are claiming to have seen things and had dealt with this, that, the other. And so something is going on.
Well, there was this on the even on the Joe Rogan podcast. I mean, look, he loves the UFO talk. He loves, interviewing the pilots. There's legit, whether they're active or retired pilots who in their training zones, off the coast of California would literally see hovering, moving different forms of these objects where they're like, they are unidentified. And you go back to the base and they don't know what they are. I mean, how is that not real? I mean, are we just living in this like blinder mentality where, we're not accepting anything that we can't explain? I mean, God, there's got to be things that we can't explain. Whether she's, telling the truth or she's not, I mean, for me, I always keep this open mind, going back to curiosity. Like, okay, well, what is the truth? Prove to me, because look, it's not a lie until they're proven that they're lying.
Well, I'll tell you another thing. I interviewed a gentleman called Michael Schratt, who's an aviation historian. This was about 3 years ago here on Biz Jet TV. And we're talking about the TR-3B, which supposedly is an experimental aircraft built by Lockheed Martin. And it's not official that this thing exists. So we do the interview. He explains about all the different sightings of this TR-3B and how it works, and the patent that is actually registered online. You can look it up. You can see the patent registered for this this anti-gravity technology. This is how this thing is powered. So we published a video, and anyway, it's had over 150,000 views up until now. Now, someone could say 150,000 views isn't much, but wait a minute. If you read the reviews underneath, there's at least 30 to 40 people that claim to have seen this thing. And there's people claiming to have seen it in Turkey, in Saudi Arabia, in Oklahoma,
Wow.
in London, from all over the world, even like yesterday. And every week I get somebody comment on this video that they've seen this thing. So there's obviously something going on. It officially doesn't exist, but this thing is very silent. It flies really, really fast. It does 90-degree turns at like Mach 25. And it has lights on it. It comes down very low sometimes, slight humming noise. This is what people are saying that have seen this thing. So there's obviously something going on. I even interviewed Erin Lear, who's the granddaughter of Bill Lear, and she was telling me her uncle John, he was big into this kind of thing, and he had some interesting stories to tell. So
Now,
you've
Fabrizio,
got.
let me ask you this too, because obviously the military and civilians, I mean, we do control a lot of these UFOs. Do you think the majority of the UFO sightings are more military, or do you think that they're from a different planet or a different like do you think it's more military, or do you think it's other?
Well, let's put it this way. I mean, I've been looking at this subject since I was 9 years old. Now I'm 54, so it's a long time. And this is my take on it. Now, being a professional pilot with thousands of hours and that, like yourself, you and I are trained to recognize flying objects. Now, most of the people that see these unidentified flying objects are not trained to identify what a flying object is. So when you go in and you talk to these people and you ask them certain questions, 90% of the time it was a helicopter, a satellite, a plane, a flock of birds, whatever. So we can immediately discard 90% of these reports, because the people that are reporting it don't know what they were looking at. So for them, it's unidentified. But if you ask the right questions, you immediately manage to identify what it actually was. Now, of the 10% that remain unidentified, probably most of them, probably 90% of that 10% are probably experimental aircraft. Some of them being military, some of them maybe somebody in their backyard that's come up with some invention and they're doing a test flight. And they scare the neighbors by landing this thing in their back garden. So I think some of that. But there's still a percentage, it's a small percentage, of stuff that is unidentified and could potentially be from another world. But it's a very, very small number. Then you've got all these people that are claiming to have met with the aliens and this, and some of them have written lots of books, and some of them are doing conferences, and they get paid a lot of money to do this. There's one guy that claims you pay him some money and he'll sit there with you in a field and he'll call these flying saucers in and they'll land, and he's charging money for it. So you've also got all these people that are trying to jump on this bandwagon and capitalize on the whole UFO thing, making people believe they're going to meet with an alien when they're not. Now, I'd be very careful when you're doing that, because if suddenly you upset the real aliens, I wouldn't want to be them. But I think there is a certain degree of visiting happening from other worlds. But it's
Fabrizio, I don't think you have to worry about that. I don't think they're going to be able to find you.
I mean, whatever. I mean,
in your underground bunker, I think you're good, man. I think you're safe in your bunker.
My underground bunker. Yeah, but
no. Look, I think UFOs. I think it's a fascinating story, and I'm interested and curious to see kind of how this thing unfolds. And I think a lot of things are going to continue to unfold, because social media has also made we're no longer reading the print, we're no longer reading the newspaper anymore. So like even way back in the 80s and the 90s when they're uncovering these stories, it didn't hit everybody. No, a lot of people didn't see it. And actually, I remember when, even when I was a commercial airline pilot, if you even talked about or thought about saying UFOs, they would actually look at you like you were a bit batshit crazy, like you were like a Looney Tune.
Yeah,
and so I think a lot of people were like, oh, well, even if I see something, I don't want to say it, because am I going to lose my job? Like this is literally a fear. When you fly for a living, this is the sad piece is, you literally go to work every single day and you're like, am I going to keep my job? Do I say the right thing? Am I, do I look the right way? Like this is a real thing in our community, in our society today.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that's happening right now is the decentralization of information. We see the decentralization of the economy as well, with cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and whatever that's happening. But the advent now of citizen journalists, where you with your mobile phone can go out there and film something or report something, post it on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube, and become a journalist yourself. through a blog, through a video channel. And so I think more and more people are tuning into these alternative journalists, researchers, whatever you want to call them, bloggers, vloggers, whatnot. And the mainstream media is losing more and more power and credibility. I mean, we just recently saw the Tate brothers in Romania that were jailed for 3 or 4 months. They recently came out of jail, and the BBC sent one of their journalists over to interview Andrew Tate. And she did an absolutely appalling job at interviewing this man, trying to accuse him of this, that, the other, instead of taking the opportunity to ask him maybe what was the experience like in jail, and stuff like that, which is what Pat Bet David did when he went over there last week to interview Andrew Tate and his brother. He did a very, very clever interview. I think there was a lot of value in that. So, people and the mainstream media are losing credibility because of their behavior, and the advent of citizen journalists with their mobile phone. And the only way to shut these people down is to shut the internet down. But no one wants that. So I think the decentralization of the economy, of information, whatever, is putting power in the hands of the people. And I think ultimately this is a great thing that's happening. And so the whole subject of UFOs, we're going to get to the bottom of this very quickly, because people have got, their own TV station in their phone.
Yeah.
Which didn't happen 20 years ago.
Maybe we get to the point where, we're creating these look-alike UFOs. I said it earlier. I think that, the Jetsons, all these programming pieces, I mean, these happen, 10, 20, 30 years before things actually come into place. I mean, why couldn't we have cars that fly? I mean, we're seeing a lot of these, like I literally on Instagram and social media, I'm seeing, 4 or 5 main drivers in these car airplanes where they're convertible.
And
they've been working on these. They've been working on these for 10 years, and they're now finally starting to get traction because you integrate them with technology, right? And also users. I mean, Uber. When we had COVID, Uber and Amazon, these were some of the biggest winners because people realized the convenience of them. Well, I mean, even if we don't fly them ourselves, you're going to be able to use them in large scale with these companies who want to provide a service. We are now moving into a service age because of the aging population, not just in the US, but across the globe. And so I think these companies are going to continue to win, which overlays into what we're talking about, which is, I mean, look, to me, the Jetsons, that's a bunch of flying UFOs in comparison to today's world. Because look, aviation hasn't changed in 60 years, maybe longer.
I talk about this in my book, the Quantum Economy, which Grant kindly endorsed. I talk about this, and I talk about, everything has accelerated over the last few years. I mean, the internet, our life in general, but only one thing hasn't accelerated. We're still flying airplanes at the same speed we were flying them in the 1950s and 60s. So Elon Musk has already talked about flying people on rockets from anywhere to anywhere in less than an hour. And that can be done with current technology. When William Shatner, the actor that plays Captain Kirk, flew up with Blue Origin and back down again in Texas, he could have easily landed in Australia instead of back in Texas. And that would have been, a 30, 40 minute flight. And that's coming. They're going to fly cargo first, and then they're going to fly people. That's coming. But
well, I hope they call me. Hey, Fabrizio, I hope they call you and me so we can go fly them.
Yeah, and this is the other point. When they talk about the TR-3B and the technology in the TR-3B, and assuming it exists or not exists, but let's think about it. Let's just go back a little bit.
Yeah, what is the TR-3B? I don't know what that is. What is that?
It's this flying machine that flies at Mach 24 that people claim to have seen. The one I did in my video. Right, there. Yeah.
Got it, okay.
So now, if we look at airplanes and the speed, I mean, we've had changes in avionics now with the new Garmin avionics, and now, some of these, like the Cirrus Vision Jet, can land on its own. You press the button, and if the pilot passes out, the passenger can press the button, and the plane will land on its own. That technology is already here today, but we're still flying at the same speeds we flew back in 1969 when I was born. So why haven't airplanes accelerated? Or have they, and they're not telling us? And then if we look at, for example, the lunar landings, 6 ships landed on the moon, 12 men walked on the moon, and we haven't been back since 1972. Why? Now, some people say we never went there. Other people said we went and we saw something there, so we haven't gone back again. I don't know what the answer is to that, but the fact is we haven't been back. So is it, some people say there's an alternative or secret space program, and we have been going back into space with technologies that have been developed, but they don't want to disclose this information to people. So I don't quite know what's going on, but certainly we need to be increasing in speed in the way we fly. or the way we get transported from A to B. How we do that, I don't know. But, you know, the technology has to come. If it's already out there, if it's there and they're trying to not let us know about it because of citizen journalists, this news is going to get out there. Some people are already claiming that news is out there. But, you know, I certainly see in the next 10 years, we're going to see some interesting changes, and we will be flying a lot faster or getting from A to B a lot quicker, whether that's with teleportation or through a wormhole or a portal or on a rocket. I don't know, but it's coming because that's the last thing that's missing now is our speed to be able to move from A to B. Because everything else, you know, through the internet and our phones, and I mean, think the power processing you have in an iPhone these days is a lot more power in an iPhone than was in the Apollo 11 that took Neil Armstrong to the moon.
So, well, and Fabrizio, just really quick too, because I know we're going to move on, but I personally believe that we did land on the moon. I had the pleasure of flying Neil Armstrong on one of my airplanes, and it's crazy, you know, because people have these cool moments in time. Like I've flown a lot of people. You know, we actually were delayed one time because Snoop Dogg was, you know, stuck at security. I wonder why Snoop Dogg was stuck at security. I'm not saying anything, but I can tell you there was a certain smell that came with him when he walked onto the airplane. But no, in all seriousness, I flew Neil Armstrong. He lived in Cincinnati before he passed away, and it was one of the greatest moments. Like there's different moments in life that we all have, whether we're, you know, close to somebody or we get to experience something. And he flew in first class where I was captaining the ship, the CRJ-7, and I flew him, and it was really cool. Like in the way that he operated, the way, you know, he was. But how do you take that away from somebody, right? Like if we're going to the moon now, I truly believe that NASA has brought people to the moon. I do believe they landed, and I just think it's
so do I. I think we did go. I think we did. I've met some of the guys that have landed on the moon, and I don't think they're lying. And I've met a few other astronauts. One of the guys I met was the commander of the space station. He was up there in space for 6 months. And the guy's not lying. He's been up there. So, you know, people are going to space.
I don't see why in how people can, like, why is it such a tough thing? It's just we haven't put enough resources to make it a normal thing.
And there's a lot we can learn from going to space.
1,000%. I mean, God, you know, relieve me from some of this gravity. You know, or the radiation, you know, just a couple of things that actually kill us. You know, let's break free from this. Yeah.
But so in closing, Ryan, how do you see the future, and what are your plans and your vision for your future?
Well, look, I think it's combined with both aviation and also real estate. You know, I've never lost track of where I came from or where I'm going, because I think it's really important. And the more that I get involved in the real estate community, the more I realize the synergies between aviation and space and real estate, they all come together. So I've really embraced, you know, my whether it's, you call it two lives, or, you know, my aviation background and my real estate background, but I do think that they have a natural fit. And I think the future has a lot of opportunities for both. I've never seen so much private GA in my life. Like I've never seen it the way it is right now, and the demand for it. You know, before, when Trump opened his shuttle from New York to DC, it didn't work because there wasn't a demand for it. And there's obviously a lot of other moving pieces, but now you have ExoJet and companies like them where they're actually starting to see a lot of success between people love the New York, but they also love the Florida. And so I think that different markets, and again, I'm just specifically talking about the U.S. and these different markets, but I do think that whether it's aviation or real estate, I think there's a lot of opportunities. I think that we're going to see the way that operations are ran. I do think that entrepreneurs are going to continue to thrive. And, you know, I'm a pessimist, but I'm also an opportunist, and I'm optimistic about, you know, what we are going to see. And also, I hope and pray that aviation does change, because between you and me, I hope they call you and me and say, hey, look, you guys want to fly this rocket ship at several Mach to really thrill and energize that inner kid in us.
I mean, it's coming. I mean, we've been a bit slow up until now, but, you know, I think, as I said, I think citizen journalists and the internet is just getting information out there, and they can only hide so much these days. So if the technology is out there, it's going to be out there. officially.
Hey, just don't forget about your real estate guy over here, okay? Just know at heart, I still like flying airplanes. I like real estate because I can get my money working for me.
Yep.
But man, there is nothing like strapping your ass into a jet. And look, even if you're going 500, 600, 700 miles an hour, 50 feet above the deck, it's still thrilling. If we can go faster than that, like the SR and some of these monster airplanes, I'm willing to do it.
Yeah, super. Ryan, thank you very much for being on Biz Jet TV. Everybody, remember to subscribe to the channel. Get yourself a copy of The Quantum Economy. Click on the link below for that. And we'll see you on the next one. Thank you. Okay, I'll just stop the recording here.